He looked harmless at first, just a man on a bench, sipping a beer. But the little girl sitting next to him didn't look so relaxed. She looked frozen, like she didn't know how to ask for help. That's when Denzel Washington slowed down. And what happened next? You'll want to see it for yourself. It was just another sunny afternoon in Los Angeles, the kind of day where strangers cross paths without a second thought. Kids played, joggers passed by, and the sidewalks buzzed with quiet routine. Denzel Washington was out for a walk. Nothing special, no cameras, no entourage, just a man enjoying a rare moment of peace in the city. But as he turned a corner onto a palm-lined street, something tugged at his focus. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was subtle, too subtle for most people to notice. A green bench, a bearded man holding a brown bottle, and a girl small, no older than 9 or 10 sitting too still for a child her age. Denzel's eyes narrowed, not in suspicion, but in instinct. She wasn't laughing, she wasn't even fidgeting. She just sat there, hands clasped in her lap, her eyes darting nervously toward the man beside her. The man laughed, casually, as if trying to break the ice. But there was something off in the way he leaned too close, in the way his beer tilted toward her when he gestured. No one else on the street seemed to notice. Cars rolled by. A woman passed with her dog. But Denzel's steps slowed. In that moment, time seemed to split. One path said, "Keep walking. Don't assume. It's none of your business." But the other, the one guided by something deeper, said, "No, stop. Not this time." Because what Denzel saw wasn't about fame. It wasn't about image. It was about a little girl, sitting too still, too silent, in a city where silence can cost more than words. And whether anyone else saw it or not, Denzel did. As Denzel approached the bench, the girl's expression shifted. It wasn't relief, it was confusion, even fear. Not of him, but of what his presence might mean. That told him everything. She was alone, and whatever was happening here, she wasn't sure if anyone would be on her side. The man beside her, still holding his beer like it was part of his personality, noticed Denzel too. He gave a half smile. That kind of smile men wear when they think they've got nothing to worry about. He leaned back, trying to appear relaxed, but something in his posture screamed entitlement, like he'd been in this position before and gotten away with it. The man looked at the girl and said something low. Denzel didn't hear the words, but he saw her reaction, shoulders tensing, eyes glancing down. That was enough. He stepped closer. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, his tone calm but steady. The man's response came too quickly, like a rehearsed line. "Oh yeah, just waiting with my niece here. Her parents are late." He chuckled, raising the bottle slightly. Like that excused the entire situation. But the girl didn't nod. She didn't say a word. Her silence betrayed the script. Denzel's gaze didn't move from the man, but his voice softened as he spoke to the girl. "You okay, sweetheart? You need help?" She looked up, caught between fear and hope, her eyes silently screaming, a message she was too afraid to say aloud. The man laughed again, louder now, trying to control the narrative. "Come on, man. You know how kids are. She's just shy." His hand brushed too close to her shoulder. And that's when something inside Denzel changed. Because this wasn't about shyness. This wasn't about misunderstanding. This was about power. And the way this man used it, like a weapon, hidden behind cheap charm and plausible lies. And no one else on that street was stopping. But Denzel had already made his choice. Denzel didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His presence alone carried weight, not the weight of celebrity, but of a man who knew exactly what silence could cost. He looked straight at the girl again, careful not to frighten her. "What's your name?" he asked gently. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Her hands twisted in her lap. She wasn't just scared, she was measuring risk, the way only kids in danger learn to do. The man's tone shifted now, his smile thinning. "She don't need to talk to strangers. I told you, man, she's my niece. Her folks are on their way." The words came fast, clipped, defensive. Denzel didn't react to the excuse. He just nodded slightly, then took a subtle step between the man and the girl. "She doesn't seem comfortable," he said. "And if she's your niece, I'm sure you don't mind if we call her parents." There it was, the moment where masks start to slip. The man's face twitched, ever so slightly. A pause, a flash of calculation behind the sunglasses. "Ain't no need for that," he muttered. "I said they're coming. Mind your own." "Then you won't mind waiting with me here until they do," Denzel interrupted. Calm, icy calm, not backing down, not escalating, just holding the line. By now, people were beginning to glance over. Not stop, not act, but notice. And to men like the one on the bench, attention is like sunlight to mold. He shifted in his seat, laughed nervously, and tried to regain control. "You're that actor, huh?" he said, pointing the neck of his beer toward Denzel. "Didn't think you people got involved in other folks' business." The tone landed heavy. The words weren't just dismissive, they were loaded. Denzel didn't flinch. He'd heard that tone before. It wasn't new. It was the voice of a man who'd been allowed to slip past consequences because no one wanted to make a scene. But this wasn't about making a scene. It was about making a choice. Because every moment that passed, the girl stayed quiet. And silence, in the wrong hands, is exactly what this man counted on. The moment stretched, that kind of thick, unbearable quiet where everyone waits for someone else to do something. The girl stared down at her shoes, frozen. The man sat rigid, fake smile gone, grip tightening around his beer like it was the last thing keeping him grounded. And Denzel, still standing there, still calm, but now completely focused. He wasn't acting anymore. He was watching, and more importantly, refusing to look away. Then the man made a move. Not violent, not loud, but subtle and ugly. He leaned close to the girl, lowered his voice just enough, and whispered something directly into her ear. Denzel saw her flinch. Not a full-body jolt, just a shoulder twitch sharp, involuntary, like a warning had just been delivered. That was it. Denzel stepped in. One step. Close enough to make his presence unavoidable. Close enough to be seen. No words now. Just a look that told the man exactly how this was going to go. A look that said, "Not today, not with her, not while I'm breathing." The man stood up, slowly, bottle still in hand. Chest puffed slightly, trying to play tough. He looked Denzel up and down like he was trying to decide if it was worth it. "You're really gonna cause a scene over nothing?" he muttered. Denzel didn't blink. "If it's nothing, then you've got nothing to worry about, right?" That was when the man cracked. "You're just some washed-up actor trying to look like a hero. Ain't your job. Ain't your kid." A few people stopped walking. Denzel stayed perfectly still. "She's someone's kid," he said. And in that sentence, the world shifted. The man looked around. For the first time, he looked nervous. Because now eyes were on him. People were paying attention. And predators don't like the spotlight. He scoffed, stepped back, muttered something under his breath, and started walking away quickly. The bottle dropped into a trash can. His shoulders hunched. His swagger was gone. But Denzel wasn't done. Because the little girl still hadn't moved. And sometimes the real danger isn't the man on the bench. It's what silence leaves behind. The man disappeared down the street, swallowed by the moving crowd. But Denzel didn't chase him. That part was over. The real moment, the one that actually mattered, was still sitting there on the bench. A little girl with braids, barely 10, still clutching her hands so tightly her knuckles had turned pale. She hadn't moved, not even when the danger walked away. So Denzel knelt. Not in some grand cinematic gesture, not to be seen, but to be eye level. To show her that now, there was no one above her. No one to answer to. Just someone with her. "Hey," he said softly. "You're safe now. You did nothing wrong." And for the first time, her eyes met his. That was the shift. Not in the crowd, not in the story, but in her. A single breath left her lungs, like she'd been holding it for 10 minutes. Then, slowly, her hand moved toward her pocket. She pulled out a pink flip phone. Old, scuffed. She held it up silently. "Your parents?" Denzel asked. She nodded finally. Just once. He took the phone gently, looked at the last number dialed, and without asking, pressed redial. It rang twice. Then a frantic voice burst through the speaker. It was her mother. The words came fast, too fast. Panic, confusion, fear. Denzel spoke calmly, told her where they were. No, she wasn't hurt. Yes, she was safe. Yes, someone had been bothering her. Yes, you need to come now. But even as the call ended, and help was on the way, Denzel stayed there. Because sometimes saving someone isn't loud. It's not action movie drama. Sometimes it's just staying until they stop shaking. And that's what he did. She didn't say much. She didn't need to. Kids like her learn early that silence is armor. But with every passing minute, the tension in her shoulders eased just a little. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just breathed slow. Deep, real breath sand. Denzel stayed with her. Grounded, quiet, never looking away. People walked past, some glancing, some stopping for a second before moving on. A few whispered when they recognized him. But none of that mattered. Because now the balance had shifted. The man was gone. The threat had retreated. But more importantly, the girl wasn't alone anymore. And that was the real change. Not what Denzel did, but what he refused to ignore. A car pulled up fast, brakes squealing slightly as it stopped at the curb. A woman leapt out barefoot, keys in hand, panic all over her face. The girl didn't move at first. Then her eyes welled up, and she ran straight into her mother's arms. No scream, no dramatic collapse, just a silent, desperate grip like she was trying to become part of her again. Denzel stood back, giving them space. The mother looked up at him, and for a moment she couldn't speak. She recognized him, sure. Everyone did. But that wasn't what mattered. She whispered, "Thank you," voice cracked and breathless. Denzel just nodded. "She's strong," he said. Then, quietly, he turned and began walking away. No need for applause, no need to explain. But as he left, something else began to happen. People who had passed earlier started coming back. A woman asked if the girl needed water. A man offered to wait with the mother until she calmed down. Another called in a report to the local precinct, describing the man from the bench. One act had opened the floodgates. Because sometimes, courage is contagious. All it takes is one person to stand still. And suddenly, others remember how. As Denzel walked away, the street behind him changed. Not dramatically, not with sirens or applause, but with presence. People who might have looked the other way now lingered. Not out of curiosity, but out of conscience. The air felt different charged, aware. The mother clutched her daughter like she was holding on to the last real thing in the world, and in that grip was 1,000 unspoken fears and 1,000 silent thanks. But it wasn't over for Denzel. He didn't walk fast. He didn't pull out his phone. He just let the weight of what had nearly happened settle over him. Because that's the part people don't talk about. The almosts. The moments that nearly became headlines. The lives that don't end in tragedy because someone decided to see instead of look away. That girl would go home tonight. She'd sleep in her bed. Her mother would probably check on her every hour just to be sure. And maybe for a long time she'd avoid benches or strangers or anything that reminded her of what could have been. But eventually, slowly, she'd grow into that moment, and one day, she'd remember that a man stopped. Not a bodyguard, not a police officer, not someone paid to protect her. Just a man who could have kept walking and didn't. And that's the part that hit the hardest. Because Denzel knew he wasn't a hero. He didn't do anything someone else couldn't have done. He just said no. No to pretending it was fine. No to hoping someone else would step in. No to the kind of silence that lets shadows grow. He thought of his own daughter, of every girl who gets told to be careful while the world refuses to protect them. He thought of how many times this story doesn't end this way. And he kept walking. No interview, no spotlight, because this wasn't about him. It was about her. And the terrifying fact that if he hadn't stopped, no one might have. 3 days later, a blurry cell phone video surfaced online. It wasn't staged. It wasn't shared by a news outlet or a publicity team. Just a bystander, sitting at a cafe across the street, who had quietly hit record when they noticed a famous face slowing down near a bench. The clip was only 40 seconds long, shaky, grainy, the kind of video you'd scroll past without thinking twice. Until you didn't, because as it played, the comments exploded. You couldn't hear what was being said, but the body language was everything. A man leaning too close to a little girl, her shoulders tense, her face blank with fear, and then Denzel stepping in, calm, direct, blocking, protecting, not performing, just being there in a way that no one else was. The post didn't even use his name. The caption was simple. This man just quietly saved a little girl. No yelling, no cameras, just stepped in. I didn't know who he was until someone told me later. And that's when the internet caught fire. Thousands of shares, then millions. Not because of who he was, but because of what he did. People weren't just praising the act, they were reckoning with the question it raised. Would I have stopped? Would I have seen her? Then came the twist. A local detective who had seen the video reached out to the mother. Within hours, an alert went out matching the description of the man from the bench. Turns out, this wasn't the first time he'd done something like this. There were reports scattered, disconnected from different neighborhoods, but no one had ever caught him in the act. Until now. That 40-second clip, it wasn't just a viral moment. It was evidence. And because Denzel stopped, because one person chose to see what others ignored, a predator was now being hunted instead of hiding. And the girl? She became more than a victim. She became the reason it stopped. The reaction wasn't like the usual celebrity headlines. This wasn't a red carpet moment or an award speech gone viral. This was different. More real. It spread from social media to morning shows, parenting blogs, local news segments, not because Denzel had done something flashy, but because he had done what so many others didn't. People didn't just repost the clip, they started asking questions. Schools brought it up in classrooms. Community groups used it as a case study. Not to praise a famous actor, but to teach awareness, courage, presence. In a world flooded with distractions, the video reminded people of something brutally simple. Look up. Pay attention. Step in. Even celebrities began sharing the clip not for clout, but with captions like, "This is how it's done," or "Protect our kids," period. But the moment that really landed didn't come from Denzel. It came from the little girl's mom. She posted just once. No filter, no PR polish, just a photo of her daughter's tiny hand wrapped around her own. The caption was quiet. "I almost lost her, and no one would have known." He didn't do it for attention. He just stayed. We don't need more heroes. We need more present people. That single sentence hit harder than any headline. And still Denzel never commented. No tweet, no interview, not even a public thank you. Because for him, it was never a story. It was a moment. And moments like that, you don't perform them. You show up for them. And that silence spoke louder than 1,000 viral clips ever could. A week passed. Then 2. The video faded from the trending lists. New headlines took its place. As always, the internet moved on. But something stayed with Pio Plenot, the clip, not the fame, not even the man himself. It was the feeling. That uncomfortable knot in the chest when you realize how close the world comes, every single day, to letting something slip through the cracks. How easily a child can sit in fear, in public, invisible to the passing crowd. How silence wraps around danger like camouflage. And how rare it is for some Onino special, not perfect, just presento tear that silence open and say, "No, that girl will grow up. And maybe she won't remember the man's face. Maybe she won't even remember Denzel's name. But she'll remember that someone saw her, that someone didn't look away, that someone stayed. And the rest of us? We'll remember the image of a man who could have kept walking but didn't. Not because he's famous, because he knew. Sometimes, all it takes to change a life is to stop for 30 seconds and choose to care. And the real question, the one that lingers long after the story ends, isn't about him. It's about us. Would we have stopped? Would we have seen her? Or would we still be walking?